and the media, it's a nexus between all three. And the problem here is that because nobody is going after all the corruption that has been exposed by journalists of the politicians, whether it's in the Congress party or in the BJP party, no action has been taken on anyone.
I want to name names.
All actions have to be taken against everybody.
What about Rakesh Sharma's allegations against the management of Dainik Jagran? Dainik Jagran is no ordinary newspaper. It is the world's most widely circulated newspaper. There are dozens and dozens of documented cases. No action has been taken. That's why the corrupt feel emboldened.
The corrupt feel emboldened. Well, that's the disheartening reality at the moment. A lot of questions to which as yet perhaps we're not seeing as many answers as we would like to, but I'd like to thank all our viewers for joining me tonight on this discussion. We'll take a very quick break at this point, but still ahead, our focus on an Indian Army major who took on the army to marry the woman he loved. That's coming up in a bit. Welcome back to Left, Right and Centre. Our other big focus tonight, a young major who's taken the Indian Army to court and won the battle to marry the woman he loves, who's a Sri Lankan national. But Major Vikas Kumar's happy ending comes after a year-and-a-half-long legal battle, during which time he's been serving in the army in the northeast. The army has now agreed to accept his resignation as long as he pays for his training.
It may seem like a plot from a Yash Raj movie, an army major who falls in love with a girl from foreign country, struggling to overcome all odds to give his love story a fairy tale ending. But for 35-year-old Major Vikas Kumar, this is no real romance. And in his case, the obstacle, many will say, was the army. When Major Vikas approached the army seeking permission to marry his Sri Lankan girlfriend, the army refused to give its blessings. According to the rules, any army personnel wanting to marry a foreigner must obtain government sanction and the spouse must become an Indian citizen. The order, however, allows the personnel to resign if their foreign spouse refuses to give up their original citizenship. So, in 2011, Major Vikas decided to resign. But the army rejected his resignation, citing the following grounds. He was yet to fulfill the terms of his commission. The Corps of Signals has a 32% shortage of officers. And Kumar was under investigation for not reporting his affair with a foreign national. That's when the legal battle began.
The Karnataka High Court stepped in and asked the army to reconsider its decision in 60 days' time and even slammed the army for its antiquated law. The court said, and I quote, that the world has become a global village. Distrust and discrimination against a foreign citizen has become the order of the day. The court says there is no empirical data which shows that a foreign spouse invariably will constitute a weak link in a matter of national security.
After the court wrap, the army has now decided to relieve the officer, but it comes at a cost. Major Vikas will have to refund the entire cost of his training at the NDA and IMA. Now, even as the case sparks a personal choice versus national security debate, sources close to Major Vikas say the Major and his family want to end this ordeal. They believe the army is a wonderful institution, but also believe that the Major has a fundamental right to marry whom he chooses. Bureau Report, NDTV.
We're asking tonight, is this really a battle about personal freedom versus national security, and should the army have the last word on who its officers marry? Well, joining me on this discussion tonight is Major Vikas Kumar's lawyer, Aditya Sondhi. We'll have the army viewpoint from Lieutenant General G.D. Bakshi joining us in just a short while from now. Also with us tonight, Sonia Fateh, journalist and Pakistani citizen who lives in India and is married to an Indian, and of course, Suhail Seth. But Aditya Sondhi, let me begin with you. You're Major Vikas's lawyer. Your side claims that you played this entire thing by the book. And why did you then have to take the army to court?
Ankita, my client, being an honorable army officer, wanted to play by the rules and in that ensure that he does not violate the applicable army order by marrying a foreign citizen, and therefore chose to apply legitimately to the army, asking for him to be released in order to pursue his love interest. It was only when the army rejected that application initially that he was left with no other choice but to move the court.
Well, you're saying that in a sense, the army's rules indicated that your client could have actually got his resignation processed quite easily, and it was the army who decided to then put a spanner in the works. Is that correct?
I would think so, because the rules are rather clear that in case a serving officer wants to marry a foreign citizen and the foreign citizen is not willing to relinquish her citizenship, as was the case here, then there is no other option but to seek release from the army subject to certain conditions. And that is precisely what Major Vikas sought to do in this case.
All right, so we'll come in at this point. The Karnataka High Court said in this case, the world has become a global village. Distrust and discrimination against a foreign citizen remains. Do you find it rather disconcerting that a rule should, in effect, force a young woman to change her nationality in order to marry who she wants to marry? I mean, are the personal freedoms of two people getting trampled over here?
Well, the rule...
1 minute. I'm actually delighted that Rajiv Gandhi was a pilot in Indian Airlines. Now, who's interrupting me there?
Carry on.
Let me repeat.
Yeah.
I'm delighted that Rajiv Gandhi was a pilot in Indian Airlines and not in the Indian Air Force. Otherwise, we'd never have Sonia Gandhi as president or chairperson or whatever she is of the UPA. I think this is bizarre. You know, we are a country that, gets into a tizzy over stupid things, and we miss the woods for the trees. I mean, we are living in a borderless world. We claim to be, good souls and nice neighbors, and then we have these silly little laws which say, oh, our security will be threatened. Is our national security so fragile that a person in love marrying a Sri Lankan national will suddenly ensure that the borders are porous and that the Sri Lankans will overtake us? I mean, we have to actually grow up and smell the coffee.
But do you believe there
is
at all...
For the Indian Army to waste so much of time...
All right, but do you believe there is at all a case to be made for people in defense posts and strategic posts to have some sort of higher standard expected of them, even in their personal lives?
Look, you can't... I mean, I don't know about other people, but you can't decide and choose to fall in love with a particular nationality unless you belong to some Kappanchayat. For God's sake, I mean, he fell in love with a Sri Lankan. It's not his fault or the Sri Lankan's fault. He could have fallen in love with, a tree if he were belonging to some kind of other dispensation. He just happened to fall in love. Now, should we go back and tell the army that you must redefine the rules of love when army officers actually join the army? There is an issue about security, but I'm sure there are better, more mature, more logical ways of addressing this. A, B. Let's imagine there is a security issue. Then does it take so long to release an officer? Do you then become even more petty and say, oh, now return all the money that we spent on you for training? I mean, how petty and silly can we get? We have the highest regard for the Indian Army. We have the highest regard for our defense services, but you can't have laws which are antiquated, which belong to primitive times.
Let me just get in Lieutenant General G.D. Bakshi on this. Thank you for joining us on the show. What's being said at this point is this is an antiquated law. This is a law that says the spouse, if he or she is a foreign national, has to give up their citizenship. In this case, if they don't sign an affidavit to that effect, then the army can begin the process of this officer quitting the army.
That's right.
This seems to be exactly what the gentleman in question tried to do. But even then the army had a problem. Is this actually even going further than the rule book itself?
Look, please understand the military micro-society in which we are living. As of date, we are short of 18,000 officers at their cutting edge. It's a soft generation. People aren't coming forth to join the armed forces. And when I joined the army in 1971 and we were just pushed into the battle, we knew it as far back as then that one of the smartest ways to get out of the army and look for greener pastures if you have had too much of the firing and shooting is to go say that you are marrying a foreign national and the army will throw you out. You see, so I'm sorry, you have to see it in that light. Unfortunately, this gentleman was in the signals. These are the people who take care of our codes, our ciphers. So please don't blame the army if it is trying to be a little careful.
Aditya Sondhi, do respond. We have a suggestion being made over here that your client was in effect trying to get out of his obligations to the army.
While I have the highest regard for General Bakshi, I would have to beg to differ as far as that suggestion is concerned. He has shown his bona fides in terms of making a disclosure at the earlier stage. His fiancée is earlier a student of English literature in Bangalore and now pursuing further studies in English literature and teaching. And this is a genuine pursuit of his heart. I do understand that there may be aberrations. There could be cases where people could possibly abuse the army order. But even there, let me assure you that the Honorable High Court has imposed a condition while disposing his petition that his marriage certificate ought to be furnished to the authorities and his release be made subject to such marriage certificate being provided. So I would say that in the totality of circumstances, this is a bona fide case where the shortage of army officers and other compulsions that the army may have to be balanced with the individual freedoms and rights of individuals, including serving army officers.
And how many